Philadelphia 76ers and the Brooklyn Nets are in the middle of one of the fiercest tank battles we have ever seen. Both teams are 23-50 and are desperately trying to grasp that number 5 spot in the Tankathon leaderboard. This tank war between these two poverty franchises will be talked about for years to come, and that begs the question, with 9 games left to go for both teams, can the 76ers out-tank the Brooklyn Nets and secure the best possible lottery odds to keep their pick? Welcome on into NZ for 3, where no matter how garbage the 76ers are, we talk about them because we are sick in the head. So yeah, the Sixers and the Nets both trying to lose as many games as possible to get those lottery odds in this stacked draft class. And what we are going to do today is look at the rest of their schedules and see whether the Sixers are able to lose more games than the Nets in that span. They're both 23-50, tied for that number 5 spot, and it is going to be a close one. It will come down to the wire. And if there's one thing the Sixers are actually good at, it is tanking. So the Nets have a pretty tough opponent, although the Nets are no slouch either. They are really good at tanking. I've been tuning into some of their games this season, and they just know how to blow games. Like, they got games against the Hornets or some other trash teams where they got like 10-plus point leads, and it just vanishes so quickly. They make the stupidest plays possible. So they know how to throw games. We know what the Nets are trying to do. We know what the Sixers are trying to do. And will the Sixers be trash enough to go 0-15 ever since they lost to the Houston Rockets? So they play the Miami Heat, and the Heat are undefeated against the Sixers, and the Sixers never really beat Miami either way, no matter who's on the roster. So I don't see the Sixers winning that one. I'm going to chalk that up as an L. Speaking of teams who are undefeated against the Sixers, we have the Toronto Raptors. This tank battle is going to be really fierce in particular, even though the Raptors are pretty much eliminated from that number 5 spot. They're still trying to get their best lottery odds as the season comes to a close, so we'll see. You never know if the Raptors come out of nowhere and the Nets win some games and the Sixers win some games. We'll see, but the Raptors have built a good cushion that separates them from Brooklyn and Philadelphia. But yeah, as I said, the Raptors are undefeated against the Sixers, so I don't see the Sixers at this point in the season beating Toronto, so we're going to chalk that up as an L too. Then we got a 3-game stretch against some playoff caliber teams. We got the New York Knicks, the Milwaukee Bucks, and the Minnesota Timberwolves. So the Sixers and the Knicks are going to win that one. The Milwaukee Bucks, the Bucks did lose Damian Lillard recently, but you still got Giannis Antetokounmpo, still got a relatively decent team, good enough at least to beat this tanking Sixers squad. I don't think Giannis is going to lose to Justin Edwards and Alex Reese. Then you got the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have been playing some pretty decent ball as of late, so I don't really see the Sixers pulling off the upset there. I'm going to make that an L2. Then you play the Miami Heat again. Maybe the Sixers win, most likely not. So yeah, the Sixers are going to lose that game as well. So they're already going 0-6 in this stretch. I don't really think the Sixers are good enough to really pull off some crazy upset against any of those teams. But you are playing for these last 3 games: the Washington Wizards, the Atlanta Hawks, and the Chicago Bulls. And the problem with that is that the Hawks and the Wizards are both coming off a back-to-back when they meet the 76ers. So they'll be on the second half of a back-to-back against Philly. The Sixers do play a back-to-back against Miami and Toronto, but that's all they have for the rest of the season. So they're going to have some days of rest when they meet up with Washington and Atlanta. And, Chicago, they've been playing some decent ball as well, but, it's literally the last game of the season. Are they going to be playing their best players? We have yet to see. We can't really predict that, but most likely not. So I think the Sixers could probably win one game in those last three. I still think, though, that they will be able to win at least one of them, either against Washington, Atlanta, or Chicago. So in that 9-game stretch, I have the Sixers going 1-8, which isn't terrible, which isn't bad. Could be a lot worse, especially when they're playing Quentin Grimes still, and Gershon Yabusele, Justin Edwards. You never know when Grimes is going to erupt for another 30-plus point game or whatever. So we'll see what happens with the Sixers. But then we move on to the Brooklyn Nets, and things get a little bit more interesting because the Nets got blown out to the Toronto Raptors. That was a really disappointing game, in my opinion. I had that game up on my laptop as I was watching the Sixers and the Wizards duke it out on my TV, hoping that the Nets were able to get a W against Toronto. So will the Nets be able to out-tank the Sixers? We got the Sixers going 1-8, so we'll see with their remaining schedule. They do play the LA Clippers, a playoff caliber team. Brooklyn isn't winning that. I got them losing that game. Then they play the Washington Wizards. This is a back-to-back for the Nets, so they're going to be pretty tired, and they're already 0-2 against the Wizards on the season, and both of their losses were in February, so they are pretty recent, so I don't see Brooklyn winning that game either. So they're 0-2. Then they move over to the Dallas Mavericks, and of course, Anthony Davis, the last time he played just any basketball at all, when he came back from his abductor strain or whatever, he happened to make his return against the Nets, of course, and Dallas ended up blowing the Nets out in that game. So maybe AD might be playing again. He is currently scheduled as day-to-day, so if he plays against the Nets, if he suits up, they're probably going to beat Brooklyn. I don't see the Nets winning that game. I'm going to chalk that up as an L too. So the Nets are going to go 0-3 in that stretch, most likely. Then they move over to Minnesota. They play Minnesota twice, and Minnesota will be on a back-to-back for the second game of their 2-game stretch towards the end of the season. But both teams will be on the second half of a back-to-back, but we'll get to that soon. For the first game against Minnesota, they're still trying to fight for some playoff seeding. They're probably not going to just go nonchalant in that game. The Nets are probably going to lose. Then they play the Raptors again, and this game and the game against the New Orleans Pelicans and the Atlanta Hawks, because the Hawks happen to actually lose to the Nets pretty recently. So if the March 16th to be precise. So if the Nets can maybe find some of that magic that they did this month, they could be able to beat the Hawks again. That would help out a lot. So this 3-game stretch right here, Toronto, New Orleans, and Atlanta, that will most likely be those 3 games where the Nets could have the highest chances of winning a game. So New Orleans did beat Philly when they were on the second half of a back-to-back, and they currently have CJ McCollum and Bruce Brown scheduled or put on the injury report. Will they be able to play against the Nets? We have yet to see, but if they do, maybe the Pelicans could beat the Nets. I mean, they're pretty trash as well, and Brooklyn is really good at tanking, so maybe that's probably the one game they're going to win in this entire stretch. We just saw how they played against Toronto. So if we say that they lose to the Raptors again, and then they lose to they beat the Pelicans if they decide to just rest their guys, because talk about a cursed franchise in the New Orleans Pelicans. They have had one of the worst injury years of all time, and they just want their season to be over. So they might lose to the Nets, actually. So maybe the Nets will win that game. Then you got the Hawks and the Timberwolves again, and the New York Knicks. They're probably not going to beat the Knicks or the Wolves, but they did recently beat the Hawks, so they could win that game too. So that 3-game stretch, it's the same for the Sixers if we go back. It all really comes down to these last 3 games for both teams. We got Washington, Atlanta, Chicago for Philly, and we got Toronto, New Orleans, and Atlanta. So it's going to come down to that. I actually, now that I think about it, I have both teams going 1-8 for this remaining stretch, which means that they will be tied for the number 5 spot. And if they're tied for the number 5 spot, it will end up being a coin toss. And I'm not going to lie, man, the Sixers, they're not the luckiest franchise, in all of sports. So I don't know if they're going to end up winning that coin flip. It is a 50-50 chance, but, apply Sixers luck to that, and it's probably like a 10% chance in reality. So maybe the Sixers can lose all of those games. Maybe the Nets, who knows? Could they steal a game against Dallas? Because the Mavericks, I think they are the 11th seed in the Western Conference currently. So they could, still make a play-in spot, but really, who really knows whether they're going to try and go for it. Then you got two matchups against the Timberwolves. Could you split that? And I don't really don't see them beating the Knicks at all. So if the Nets could steal a couple of these games, maybe win against the Raptors somehow, get a revenge game, then beat the Pelicans, maybe lose to the Hawks the rest of the way through, they will be splitting hairs at this point and will most likely, in the most realistic scenario, be only one game behind the Sixers, and that will be just enough for the Sixers to jump to that number 5 spot. But being as unbiased as possible, it could always go the other way around. Maybe the Sixers rattle off 3 wins in a row because the last 3 teams decide to rest all of their best players, even though they've already pretty much been doing that. We'll see what happens, man. I hope the Sixers just get that top 5 pick. It is so important that they get the best possible lottery odds because you do have, I believe, a 63 or so % chance at keeping a top 6 pick if it was to go into the lottery, and that is really important for the Sixers because if they have one of the worst seasons, probably the worst season I've ever experienced as a Sixers fan, I've been through the process and all of that, but I knew that they were that they were trying to intentionally lose those games. But this season, they had so much expectations, signing Paul George and Joel Embiid and making that tandem with Tyrese Maxey. But here we are now, talking like it's 2016 on Tankathon.com, simming the lottery just to close things out. And the Sixers get the 7th pick. And the Bulls somehow jump to number 1, but the Sixers get number 2. Third time's the charm. And then Toronto gets the first pick. They come out of nowhere, like I said earlier, and then the Sixers pick goes to OKC. So these scenarios can very much happen. I really wish they don't because the draft lottery is on my birthday. But that's pretty much all I got. Thank you all for tuning in. If you are new to the channel, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers. I appreciate all the support. I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.